You know, some historical figures are like these deep currents in the ocean. You don't really see them on the surface, but their influence is shaping, well, everything underneath. Today, we're going to dive into the story of one such person, a man whose ideas have been quietly echoing through our science, our spirituality, and even our pop culture for over a century. So let's just jump right in with a question for you. What on earth could connect a massive sci-fi movie like The Matrix, the most famous band in history, and one of the greatest scientific minds of all time? I know it sounds like the setup for a really weird joke, but the answer is very, very real. And the connection, it spans all these different fields that seem like they're worlds apart. We're talking about the whole idea of Maya, or illusion in The Matrix. We're talking about George Harrison's spiritual awakening in the 60s, even Nikola Tesla's unique way of looking at the universe. Heck, it even connects to the founding of one of India's top science institutes. All of these separate threads, all these little ripples in our culture, they actually trace back to one single person. The answer is a man named Swami Vivekananda. He was an Indian monk who, in a life that lasted less than 40 years, managed to spark a revolution in thought that, honestly, is still unfolding today. So the question is, how did he do it? And who was this guy? All right, to really get a handle on his impact, we have to go back to the beginning, because before he was this global figure, he was just a young man in Kolkata with a ton of questions and this unshakable need to find the truth. His journey is pretty incredible. He was born Narendranath Datta, and he was a super rational, skeptical kid. But then his meeting with his guru, Sri Ramakrishna, just completely changed the course of his life. And it was his journey after that, walking all across India on foot, seeing the country and its people for himself, that's what really shaped his mission. And that journey led him to a rock at the very southern tip of India, where he meditated for days and found his life's purpose. And that purpose? It led him all the way to America, to Chicago, of all places, for the very first Parliament of the World's Religions in 1893. Now, nobody knew who he was. He was this obscure delegate from a faraway country. But he was about to give a speech that would completely change how the West thought about spirituality. So, he gets up to the podium in front of this massive crowd of 7,000 people. And with just 5 simple words, he brought the entire hall to its feet. He just said, "Sisters and brothers of America." It wasn't the formal, stuffy greeting they were all expecting. It was real. It was from the heart. It was about unity. And the reaction was absolutely electric. For 2 solid minutes, the whole place just erupted in applause. He hadn't even really started his speech yet, but just with that greeting, he had already connected with every single person in that room. So what did he actually say? Well, his message was pretty radical for the time. He wasn't there to say his religion was the best one. In fact, he argued that all religions were true, that they're just different roads leading to the same destination. He called for an end to all the intolerance and fanaticism, and he pushed this idea that you shouldn't look for God in some far-off heaven, but right here, in every single person around you. And to explain this idea of religious bigotry, he told this brilliant little story. It's about a frog who's born and raised in a tiny little well. And to him, that well is the biggest, most important body of water in the entire universe. Then one day, a frog from the ocean comes to visit and starts talking about this massive, endless sea. The well frog just can't wrap his head around it. He doesn't believe him. Vivekananda's point was simple. We all need to be willing to see beyond our own little well. But here's the thing that's so easy to forget. This global spiritual icon, this man of profound thought, he was also deeply, deeply human. And the people who knew him best, they didn't just remember his big brain. They remembered his incredible warmth, his playful sense of humor, and his razor-sharp wit. I love this story from one of his American students, Mary Funky. She said he loved to cook for them, and he'd make a whole show of it, draping a napkin over his arm and doing this perfect impression of a dining car waiter yelling, "Last call for the dining car!" It just shows you a man who found real joy in the simple things, in just taking care of people. But he could mix that playfulness with some serious principles. That same student once asked him, kind of out of the blue, how he would react if he saw a beautiful but immodestly dressed woman. And without even skipping a beat, he just calmly said that to him, she would simply appear as a hideous green frog. It was just this witty, brilliant way of saying his focus was, well, it was somewhere else entirely. And his wit wasn't just for jokes. It was an amazing teaching tool. One time, a king was challenging him on the logic of idol worship. So instead of giving him a lecture, Vivekananda turned to the king's advisor and asked him to spit on a portrait of the king. The advisor was, of course, horrified and refused, and Vivekananda just explained, look, the king isn't literally in the portrait, but disrespecting the image shows disrespect to the person. An idol works the same way. It's not God, but it's a symbol that helps a person focus on God. Simple, direct, and you'd never forget. Okay, so let's bring this all full circle. How does a 19th century monk end up influencing our world today? Well, the truth is, the echoes of his life are everywhere, once you start to look for them. Remember that crazy question from the start? Let's connect the dots. On the ship over to America, Vivekananda met and inspired the industrialist Jamsetji Tata, who went on to found the Indian Institute of Science. Decades later, George Harrison from the Beatles picks up Vivekananda's book, Raja Yoga, and says it literally turned his life around. The famous author J.D. Salinger was a huge follower of his philosophy. And yes, the central idea of the Matrix, this idea that we have to wake up from an illusory world, or Maya, that is a core teaching of the Vedanta philosophy he introduced to the West. And his impact wasn't just in big ideas. He built things that would last. He founded the Vedanta Society to give his teachings a permanent home in the West. And today, there are 36 of these centers just in the United States, still sharing his philosophy over a century later. And you might think, okay, that was 100 years ago. But get this, his relevance is still truly global. In fact, a brand new statue of him was just unveiled in the Netherlands in early 2024. That just shows you how his message of tolerance and universal harmony is still resonating with people right now, today. Back in his home country of India, his legacy is huge, especially for young people. His birthday, January 12th, is celebrated as National Youth Day. And there's a good reason for that, because at its very heart, his message was all about empowerment, about believing in yourself, and about unlocking the power that's already inside of you. And this really gets to the core of it, for young people, and honestly for all of us. He taught that we create our own reality with our thoughts. This quote is one of his most powerful. He said, the biggest mistake we can make is to think of ourselves as weak. He wanted everyone to wake up to their own inner strength. So we'll end with his most famous call to action. And it's not a gentle suggestion, it's a command. It's a powerful call to wake up, to see our own potential, and to chase our highest goals without stopping. It's a message that, more than 120 years later, is as powerful as ever. And it kind of leaves us with a question, doesn't it? What goal are we supposed to be reaching for?
Thank you for joining us. If this was meaningful, please like and subscribe to Eash Divine Discussion. May your path be filled with peace and wisdom. Stay blessed.